Over mountains, across oceans, and behind closed doors are places you are not supposed to see. Follow me and I'll take you through them to the other side, a place of never-weres and could-have-beens. If video games had shadows, these would be World of Warcraft's. Now this is a place they never let you find. For miles around, there is nothing but flat grass and faraway features cutting jaggedly into the night skyline. There are 3 distant lands visible: the tall ranges to the northeast and northwest, and the plateau to the southeast. Let's go to the plateau first. This place is called the Verdant Fields, and upon arrival you see nothing but gentle slopes covered in flowers, and the distant silhouettes of striking growths sticking upwards. Closer up, you can see that these growths are giant flowers of several beautiful varieties. The largest ones aren't unlike trees. There's this one that's doing something to itself. This one's even animated and seems to fire out its own magical pollen. At the back of this section, we can see where a developer once painted a legend, which is neat, and behind it, the fields stretch even further for miles and miles. An overhead view also shows that these fields were made up of lots of different kinds of natural spiral patterns. It's a shame we never saw them in Azeroth. To the northeast are titanic canyons of green. Over on this side is a man, and over on this side is this big guy, who is next to some of these, whatever they are. But what this section of the Emerald Dream lacks in detail, it makes up for in sheer size. It's hard to get across how huge this place is, and how long it would take to cross on foot. It's also a great green screen. And finally, to the northwest is the Emerald Forest, the place that seems to have gotten the furthest in development before the abandonment of this entire instance. First, over the mountains is a low area around a lake that's very flat and featureless. But there is a waterfall, and if you were to follow the water flow upwards, you'd get to a river amongst a forest, and the trees here are beautiful. These huge green-blue trees are rooted in the air, their roots like legs sticking out of the ground. They seem to recycle their own water. It drips down from the leaves and down the trunk where it pools at the bottom, and then is absorbed back into the tree. There's something I love about these trees. Whoever designed them just nailed it. The colours, the streams, the textures, it all looks great. Oh, and there's a white ball in the middle of the forest. Why? I doubt we'll ever know. The last time I spoke about Ironforge Mountain, and how you can sneak in and explore a vast area that you're not supposed to be in, I was reminded by several people that I'd missed a bit. Taking the same route, but then going back down the mountain on the other side, takes you to a strip of land halfway down the northern side of Ironforge Mountain that hosts a tiny dwarven village. There's a lovely big waterfall, somehow emptying into a tiny lake, a nice open field full of cows, a few dwarven homesteads carved into the rock, a barracks for the mountaineers, an incredibly informative stone signpost that points to this way, that way, and the other way, and this way leads to a mountain tunnel into nothingness. This is one of the best pieces of scenery an Alliance player will see when flying about Azeroth, and it's no wonder that one of the first places a private server will typically try to make playable is this one. Huge swaths of Azeroth, despite being on the map, don't exist. All over the place are blank spots that were never filled in. Between Stranglethorn Vale and the Blasted Lands is one of the big ones. Look at this huge mountain range. But there is actually something in there. A cave. This cave, despite being lost in nameless mountains and being tiny, actually has a bit of significance in the game's history, because of its association with this tiger. In the game's alpha, you could buy the Bengal tiger mount here, and once the game launched, this fact slowly turned into fiction and then into legend. There's nothing here now, but its story lingers on. There are other unmapped places like this, cracks between mountains and outcrops along coasts, but the biggest and most impressive one is Hyjal. On the other end of a sealed tunnel in Winterspring is a temperate forest valley, at the very height of the world. An empty paved road is our only guide, and it goes further and further up, taking us past amazing scenery. The place, though serene, has a disturbing quietness, its line of lone birds and dried lakes interrupted by pockets of the ashen devastation brought about by the events of Warcraft 3. There are also a handful of distractions. There's this destroyed structure, which now serves as a diving board off of the mountain, if you want it to. There's a really nice overlook hidden behind a wall halfway up that now serves as my new desktop wallpaper. And not too far off the road at one point is a nice set of outdoor dining furniture the demons thankfully left unscathed. Hygel's greatest secret, though, is at the end of the road. Nordrassil, the World Tree. This tree was once blessed by the dragons to protect the magical well beneath it, and, among other things, was responsible for the Night Elves' immortality. During Warcraft 3, the colossal demon Archimond climbed Nordrassil to steal its energy, but instead the tree's powers were sacrificed to strike a killing blow against him, and its success is clear to see today. It's really cool that such important landmarks to Warcraft's history are in the game, even if you do have to trespass to see them. After Nordrassil's magics had gone, the Night Elves grew themselves a new tree, Teldrassil, off of Kalimdor's northwestern coast. But if you were to keep sailing northwest of the continent, for a very, very long time, you'd find a place you're really not supposed to reach. C.A.M.P Island. This island was a private area for Blizzard's game masters, and doesn't seem to have served any purpose other than to be a spawn point for their characters. But someone took the time to decorate this place with detail, so let's take a look. C.A.M.P Island's surface is mostly occupied by this big mansion, but on the outside is a nice tropical atmosphere, with lots of big jungly trees, birds, and 10 neatly dug graves, the significance of which only a handful of people have ever known. There is a small landing with a boat, and a dirt path leading from it all the way up to the mansion's open front entrance. First is the entry room with some barrels, benches, and weapon racks, and after that is a room with some stairs going upwards and a cellar to the right full of supplies. Up the stairs is a large open room with assorted furniture and nice paintings, and a balcony which overlooks the endless ocean. And that's it really. There was never and likely will never be a reason for someone to come here, but still, it feels special. The Dead Mines has a secret. When you enter an instance, you are, in technical terms, entering a whole new map. And though all we see of these maps are the dungeons that Blizzard wanted us to see, these places were often also used for other purposes during the development of the game. With the right amount of know-how, you can break out of the mines near the entrance and down onto this large open flat. And a short distance away is this hole. Whatever the developers sculpted here, I don't think we ever found in Azeroth. I've never seen these trees floating on huge crystals, or the hot moving rocks in the middle, and I don't think I even recognise these splintered rocks that form the rim, though these weird bubbles underneath the hole look like the big bubble that's currently protecting Dalaran. A zone-shaped question we never got the answer to is, what's here? This rectangular area above the Eastern Plaguelands. Stratholm, the nearby dungeon, arguably takes up quite a bit of that space, but that doesn't explain everything. And though we still, to this day, never quite figured out what this zone would have looked like, World of Warcraft's most dedicated swimmers have paddled all the way around the northern coast to find a way in. But instead, they found quel'thalas. Well, it's called quel'thalas at least, but it's just an isolated and abandoned elven outpost in the middle of nowhere. The real Elven Kingdom is a short distance this way, though it was added as a separate instance and so can't be seen from the rest of the Eastern Kingdoms. When considering that this tiny settlement was here well before the Burning Crusade expansion, this place is an interesting look into what could have been, and its forlorn tower set against dusk gives off a beautiful Tolkien-esque atmosphere that reminds me of this Thomas Cole painting. Since we're in the area, I want to mention what's outside the inside of Naxxramas. And by that, I mean if you were to enter the instance and then break out of the Flying Fortress, what you'd see. And I mean by that, the extra stuff Blizzard had placed on the other side of this pane of glass. Out the window at the entrance to the raid, we can see the Plague Wood down below us, right where it should be. But down there is actually a different version of the Eastern Plaguelands. Light's Hope Chapel is there, the Noxious Glade is there, Stratholm is there too, but where the northeast of the zone is supposed to be is this instead. Up here between mountains is a huge wintry area with plenty of trees, and with what looks like an anchored Naxxramas at its centre, or at least quel'thalas part of it. I once heard from somewhere that this was a very early rendition of Northrend, and that could be true, but this was all present during vanilla. Could this place once have been the planned terrain for the blank spot on our map? We may never know, but I for one do choose to believe that these are the fabled northern Plaguelands, because, to me, this cold and quiet valley feels like finality. It feels like the calm before the storm, the last stop between vanilla World of Warcraft's final battle. Or maybe that's just me. When playing an earlier version of World of Warcraft, you may have at some point noticed that if you highlight Silithus with your mouse, it will light up like all the other zones, but only the top half of it. The assumption I'd always made is that the lower half is Ahn'Qiraj, where the two raids take place, but they're not half the size of Silithus, are they? So what is back there? Well, this. An entire zone. A long route completes a circuit around this entire desert, with the familiar ancient markers along the road to Silithus along the way. In the centre is what I imagine could have been a dried up lake, and around the edges are lots of interesting ruined, sand-covered structures. Some of them are impressively grand, and others are quite familiar for those who've raided here before. It seems that once upon a time, this is what Ahn'Qiraj would have looked like, but instead, all it's good for now are PvP tournaments. This next place I would never have known about if it wasn't for several commenters on the last Places Between Places. And I'm grateful, and it's so close yet so far from where we just were at Ahn'Qiraj. A small Tauren homestead on Kalimdor's southwestern coastline. This is essentially a horde equivalent to the dwarven homestead I displayed last time, but it is so much more annoying to get to, and has an extra secret. So, as for how to get there, you need to start at one of two locations, the Isle of Dread, just off of the coast of Feralus, or from Land's End Beach in far southern Tanaris. And these places are incredibly remote in and of themselves, making this maybe the furthest off the beaten path I've ever been. As for the place itself, it's a humble farm, with a fenced field, a tent with some troughs for livestock, some bales of produce, a small mill, some small fishing boats with cages, and a nicely decorated home. Despite looking quite lived in, the place is deserted, and the livestock are gone without a trace. Even the milled flour has been left, so whoever lived here seems to have left suddenly and never returned. So, it's ours now, a perfect home for any Tauren retiree. And as for the extra secrets I mentioned earlier, not far from this place are more thick trees along the same otherwise featureless coastline, and on this other patch of land is a cave. It runs deep, and a damp green fog permeates each chamber and passage. There is no life in this cave, not even the standard fungi or the sound of bats. There are only bones. I'd like to think of this place as a lovely retreat for players to head to after a long night of raiding, but it's so far away from civilization, I wouldn't recommend the trip. But perhaps it's best served as a place to retire a character, or to take a long break. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, please leave it a like. If you liked me, please subscribe. And if you have anything to say, please leave a comment. I read all of them. And a special thank you to my YouTube members Morian, Silux, Nightseeker, Jonathan Bengtson, Skoon, Patrick Manhora, Dark Lord Grimace, Lewis H, Lurend, Sovereign, Cherish, Miffy, Hydroxyl, Danson, Sea Surf, Edward Russellduck, and Riley. Have a good one.